everybody. My name's Dr. Ken Walker, and I'm the Senior Curator of Entomology at Museum Victoria in Australia, down in Melbourne. Today I'd like to introduce you to the native Australian bee fauna. Worldwide there's about 25,000 species of bees, and Australia's got around about 1,700. What I do is I name them. Confucius said, the beginning of wisdom comes when you call things by their right name. And so I'm a taxonomist, which means I give them funny, long scientific names. I'll give you an example. One of the species I called was Bi-trichopedalis. Now, bi stands for two, tricho stands for hair, and pedalis is foot. So this bee has two long hairs on its hind foot. Now, in conjunction with the species, I put together a list of the plants that they go and pollinate. And that's very important so we know what's going on there. But the Australian bee fauna is the most unique of any continent in the world. Australia has been separated from other land masses for millions and millions of years, around about 100 million years. So we developed a very unique fauna that was isolated from everything else. Now, normally when evolution occurs, it's in conjunction with something else. And so the primary plant fauna in Australia is a family called the Myrtaceae, and that's the most primitive plant family in the world. So correspondingly, Australia has the most primitive bee fauna, which has evolved with the most primitive plant family. Now, bees are divided into two big groups. We call them short-tongued bees and long-tongued bees. Short-tongued bees have got, as the name suggests, a short tongue. And the short tongue is either like a mop that laps up nectar or like a little dagger. The long-tongued bees have got like a straw and they can then suck it up. So bees that have got long tongue tend to visit flowers with a deep, long corolla, where the actual nectar is hidden at the very base, whereas bees that have got the short tongue need to go to a plant where the nectar is provided in a broad, shallow cup, like that. And that's exactly what the Myrtaceae plant family does. The bees simply sit on the side of the flower cup and they lap up the nectar. If our plant fauna is predominantly Myrtaceae, the most primitive plant family, then correspondingly Australia's bee fauna is the most primitive in the world. There are 7 bee families in the world. We have 5 of them occur in Australia, and the 2 dominant ones are the short-tongued bees. Everywhere else in the world, the dominant bee families are the long-tongued bees. So we have this unique fauna in Australia which has co-evolved with the primitive plant family, and that's really special. What's really interesting is that although we have these short-tongued bees with these blunt tongues, several of our native plants do have indeed a long corolla. And so the short-tongued bees had to find out ways to be able to access the nectar at the base of a long corolla. They used other parts of the mouth parts. All bees have got, a bit like my moustache, they've got hairs. And one species, or one whole group of bees, go on what's a plant called G-bung, which is in the genus Persunia. Now what they've done is they've taken these hairs and they've elongated the hairs, 12 hairs. And so imagine these 12 hairs elongated. You've still got a very short tongue here. But what happens is the hairs come along and then they bring those hairs together and they stick the hairs down into the deep tubular G-bung flower, and through capillary action, the nectar is drawn up like a straw, and then the little blunt tongue laps away and takes the nectar. So that's how a short-tongued bee can make use of a deep tubular flower. In Central Australia, there's a whole group called Eremophila, which 70% of Australia is desert or semi-arid. And so they had to adapt to being in a very desert environment. If you've got a lot of flowers there with a very broad, shallow cup, then the sun easily evaporates it. So we've got this whole group called Eremophila, which are kind of emu bush. And they've got deep tubular flowers. Well, instead of using hairs, they've got palps that sit off there. And these bees in the Central Australia have elongated the palps. And again, they put them together and they put them down into the deep tubular flower, and then capillary action brings them up to where the short blunt tongue is. So one of the really interesting things is that you begin naming them, and then you begin looking at their conditions and how they've evolved to be able to suit certain plants. So the G-bung bees and the Eremophila bees do not visit any other flowers. They're designed specifically for those two flowers. Whereas the bees that visit the Myrtaceae, which are our eucalypts, our gum trees, they visit. There's about 800 species of eucalypts in Australia, and they visit all of them. They've got no restrictions on what they can do, but they only visit the Myrtaceae. But there's nowhere in Australia that hasn't got myrtaceous plants in there.